This is Inside the Right. Okay, so Tim, this primary should be over, but this week, Trump lost 22% of the vote to Nikki Haley. That was in Indiana. Nikki Haley, by the way, who dropped out 8 weeks prior. That's 130,000 voters who showed up expressly to register their dissatisfaction with Donald Trump. How are you looking at what just happened in Indiana?
I think it's noteworthy. We've talked about this in other states, and it's always interesting to look at the different states as whether they allow Democrats to vote or whether they don't, whether it's a closed primary or open. Indiana is an open primary, but if you dig into the numbers, Indiana also had a governor's race, and the total number of votes were about the same in the gubernatorial primary and at the presidential primary. So if you were to assume that some big percentage of those Nikki Haley voters were actually Democrats who were just crossing over to be troublemakers, then you would assume that those Democrats wouldn't have voted in the Republican governor's primary between three crazy people.
Yeah.
It's not like they had an obvious preference in that race. So to me, it seems like it was mostly Republicans that were voting this primary. And so, even if you knock off a few points, you're talking about 20-ish%, about 1 in 5 Republicans registering their dissatisfaction. I think that is meaningful. I don't know that it's a slam dunk about for Democrats for November, but it gives them a chunk of people that are persuadable, that are Republicans, and might offset some losses Democrats are potentially facing in some other demographics that the numbers don't look as good.
Now, you alluded to this, that this has been a recurring theme. 2 weeks ago, Trump lost 17% of the vote in Pennsylvania to Nikki Haley, who at that point had been out of the race for 6 weeks. At some point, the pattern becomes clear, and this isn't just some bug for Trump. Is that right?
It is, and these are actual real votes too, and so that's meaningful. And these are actual people. It's not a poll, It is six figures worth of people that showed up. Now, Indiana isn't a swing state in the general election, so it's not quite as important. But if you go back to Pennsylvania, you now have a segment of people that the Democrats can go out and find, and speak to and try to either cajole to vote for Biden or to not vote to write somebody in. Well, it might be different in different scenarios, but so I think that it's meaningful particularly in the swing states for that reason, as it's kind of adds to the target universe of voters the Democrats can reach out to.
And just building on that exact point, can you talk about the trail of breadcrumbs that's now being left for the Biden campaign with those 130,000 voters in Indiana, 160,000 voters in Pennsylvania, and on in the other states? Like, what can the Biden campaign do with those people?
Yeah, well, at a practical level, one big breadcrumb, we might have talked about this before, but it's important to just put a finer point on it, is the numbers among the voters that are voting by mail are like pretty astonishing about how pro Haley they are. Like the Trump, weird, mail fraud, ballot fraud, lies has now made it very easy for the Biden campaign to kind of to figure out which Republicans are gettable because the MAGA crazies all vote in person
Right.
now
Trump,
because
Trump basically figured out a way to segment the gettable voters for the Biden campaign by just by
exactly.
forcing his own voters to only vote in election day, and then anybody else who's like got a modicum of reason or just wants to take advantage of the convenience, but like these non-MAGA loyalists, he's figured out a way to just segment those people and make them reachable to the Biden campaign.
Yeah, and that is a identifiable universe. Yeah, you can find the addresses of the people that voted by mail, because that's the public record. So that is good news, just as a practical level for Biden people. I think the other thing is just thinking about issues. What are the things that Nikki Haley differentiated herself from Donald Trump on? And one of them is an abortion, right? So the Biden campaign knows that abortion is a big issue for them. They know that there's a group of people they can reach on that. That's probably not the Haley voters, though. So the Haley voters have other issues: foreign policy, commitment to NATO, opposition to Russia, and commitment to democratic norms, constitutional values. Those seem like the more issues that are going to work with that crowd, so that again kind of provides a little bit of a messaging playbook and an additional batch of voters for Biden, who might not be as responsive to the other core kind of Democratic issue matrix.
And by the way, I should just note for people watching right now that this segment of these gettable Republicans are the audience for Tim and his colleagues over at the Bulwark. So, I think we should, if you're not yet subscribed to their YouTube channel, please make sure to subscribe. Help elevate their content so that they can reach more of those exact people that we're trying to go for. I'll put the link to their channel right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. Tim, do you find it curious that none of the coverage in the mainstream media really talks about Trump's waning support or the waning enthusiasm among these Republican base voters, but pretty much exclusively covers whenever Biden support is waning?
Yeah, I mean, had Biden lost 20% of the vote in a primary,
Yeah.
I mean, you can just imagine what the front page of the newspapers would be
Right.
like. I do see that. I mean, part of this is just sometimes the media criticism is so hard because like Trump is creating bad news every day. It's like, what do you cover? I mean, he's
Yeah.
he's in court and Stormy Daniels is talking about how it was like their encounter was like rape adjacent and now he's going to be seems to be on track to be convicted in a criminal court, and he's out there saying crazy stuff all the time. So
Yeah.
part of this is just there's only so much ink to spill, but I do think that a lot of the mainstream media folks are looking for cracks in the Biden coalition, to make it feel like they're covering both sides equally, right? And so as a result, because there's so much bad news by Trump out there, you kind of have to exaggerate the Biden news
Yeah.
to make it feel balanced. And not I don't want to impugn with too broad of a brush every media outlet. Some people are doing it better than others, but I do think that's a problem that you see out there where there's an imbalance in kind of discussing the problems within each coalition.
Yeah, I think that's perfectly put. I do want to give some credit to Kristi Noem because even in this media environment where Donald Trump just has raft of bad news after bad news, he's involved in 4 criminal trials, and he's come for everything from sexual assault to rape to 34 felony counts. Kristi Noem did find a way to break through because she decided on the brilliant political strategy of not only shooting her puppy but making sure that everybody in America knew about it.
Oh yeah, and having bloodlust for additional puppy murders as well. So good on you, Christy.
All right. Now, there are still a few outspoken Republicans who reporting suggests weren't contacted yet by the Biden campaign. Do you think that's a mistake on the Biden campaign's part?
I do. Part of me is like, oh wow, you didn't get called. So I think that there's some element of this where I was like, everybody has a responsibility to oppose
Are you
Donald Trump.
suggesting that some of these politicians are driven by ego?
Yeah, a little bit. I wish that some people would put on their big boy pants and let's go out there and prevent Donald
Yeah.
Trump from ending our democracy. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what I really care about. And I think that feels like there are a lot of people out there that are half-assing it. And that's true of some of these Republicans who know better, and it's true of some of the people on your side as well, Brian. But so I'd like for everybody to be on the same page here. I will say, just as a strategy thing with the Biden campaign, um, a more forceful, a more aggressive effort to try to bring Republicans out off the sidelines, I think is worthwhile. And I think that there are people that might be responsive to a call from the president, and it shouldn't take that. But if it does, then okay, let's just do it. And so it's been something I've been talking about for a while. And to me, I don't think that look, us Never Trumpers, we're doing this because we think Trump's a danger, not because we want to get invited to some White House party. Okay, it's not that big of a deal to me if I'm invited to the White House Christmas party or not. But that said, there's another layer of people out from us who don't like Trump, who it's easier and more convenient for them to do nothing and say nothing and then to vote for Joe Biden quietly in the peace of the voting booth. And if a phone call from the president or the vice president would nudge them, then that's something that we should be doing.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. And I was thinking there was a thought in my mind prior that was the more you reach out to these Republicans makes it feel like you're being deferential to the right at the expense of the left. But I don't think it's an either or strategy. I think it's an all of the above strategy.
Yeah. And again, nobody's asking Joe Biden to change his views, on issues, right?
Right. I mean, this election is largely about defending democracy. I mean, that's been his issue all along, and none of this changes that. Reaching out to someone who purports to be a pro-democracy Republican is very much in line with that branding.
Yeah, exactly. So we're asking Joe Biden to, and he's done some of this, to talk about the issues where he is in line with this group. As I said, on democracy, on protecting NATO. For example, his speech yesterday at the on Holocaust Remembrance Day, is a good example of this. I think there's a certain group of Republicans that would appeal to. So these are all things that just he probably would do anyway, right? But emphasizing them. And then private outreach, right? I mean, none of that should make the left feel like they're, getting stiff-armed or
Yeah.
anything. It's about taking what is already part of the part of their campaign and part of their message, and just actually campaigning and trying to attract, people that message is going to resonate with.
Right. I think the important thing is to avoid purity tests, to not let perfect be the enemy of good, and to recognize that we need some strategy here, because if we're not in office, we can't do anything anyway. So we can have, that we can impose these purity tests onto ourselves and say like, oh, well, we can't ever reach out to the Chris Christies of the world because he did X, Y, and Z. And like, obviously we know
Right.
about that. But at the same time, if Trump is in office, it's not going to matter what purity test we've imposed, because we're going to be sitting on the sidelines watching Trump run roughshod over our democracy.
Yeah, and on the Republican side, the same thing. Like these gettable Republicans, I don't, we're not out there saying, "Hey, Joe Biden, you got to cut EPA regulations to win us over,
Yeah.
to win us over."
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to streamline some regulations, I'm all for it. But no, this is about, finding the areas of commonality and gathering support based around those and motivating people, based around those common interests.
Well, that's the perfect place to leave off, and also the perfect place again to promote Tim's YouTube channel at the Bulwark. I'll put the link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
I'm Tim Miller.
This is Inside the Right.